All right, everyone. Hello and welcome in. Thank you for joining me on this late Sunday night for the day after Denver. Your thoughts, your comments, my reactions, our video. This is our post-game collaborative project between me and you, the audience, as we talk about our reactions and feelings following the preseason opener against the Denver Broncos, where the Vikings backups and third stringers fumbled a lot of opportunities amongst themselves to secure their spots on this roster. I don't know if you could call it a debacle because it's a preseason game and we only played backups against first stringers, but whatever adjective you want to use, it doesn't feel good. We don't feel good about that today, do we? So what I did yesterday was I asked you to leave a comment on yesterday's video, which was my reaction or initial reaction to the game. I've since collected your comments, read through them all. We had a lot. There was about 80 comments. So I picked 10 to go over today. So this is going to be your comments, your thoughts, my reactions to your thoughts and comments, and I will give you my takes. This will be our video. So that's how this works. If you were here last year, you got to experience some of these. I started doing this late during the regular season. I hope to do it for every preseason game and regular season game. So if you haven't subscribed, stick around. We could eventually see you featured in one of these videos. There's an additional game this year, so we'll get an additional weekend of getting to do this. This is always a fun project to sort of see what your reactions were in real time yesterday. I've had sort of 24 hours to kind of, soak it in and think about what you've had to say and what I have said previously. So it's always a fun project to get you, the audience, involved. And I get to, basically share my thoughts and see what I agree with and what I don't agree with. Before we begin, I do want to say thank you for the milestone that we hit early this morning. We finally reached 1.4 thousand subscribers, 1,400. I never really thought that I would get more than 1,000. 1,000 was like kind of the goal, and everything after that's just been, bonus points, because I think I resurrected this channel back when it had like less than 200 subs. It was a video game channel because I was trying to get into that market that's overly saturated. And then I was like, oh, football, let's talk about that, an even more overly saturated market. But we found our niche here in the little corner of the NFL world where we talk about the Vikings. So thank you for joining us. I hope that more of you will stick around and participate in our little program here. So with all of that out of the way and all the, pleasantries having been said, let's get into your comments. I've selected 10 of them. I can't get to everybody because we don't want this to be a half-hour video. So in the future, make sure, the post-game videos that I make, I will ask you to leave comments on there, and hopefully I will be able to get more of you involved as the season goes on. We've got a lot of games still where we can do this, so don't feel bad if you didn't make it for this one. I read all of them, by the way. I try to read every single one, so that just know that if you do leave a comment on any video, not just the post-game ones, any video, odds are I've seen it. So here we go. First comment today comes from Paul. They say, if this year is anything like last year, next man up is not ready to play. Lack of depth will turn this into a 500 or below record. Can Vikings finally give Dozier his walking papers? So the Vikings have released 2 players today, a long snapper and a defensive lineman, so they need to cut 3 more players before Tuesday evening. Hopefully Dakota Dozier is one of those people. I hope to God. I hope they finally learn their lesson and that they now see that this guy is no good against NFL-ready talent and he is no good against NFL backup talent. That's the bottom line. Dakota Dozier has got to go. He is a sore spot on this roster. Having said that, to circle back to the first part of your comment there, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I kind of feel like this is already a 500 team. There's an extra game this year, so I think we're looking at like 9-8, which is, yeah, that's a winning record, but it's just by 1 because 8-8 this year is not possible because of the additional game. So I think we're somewhere in the vicinity of a 500 team right now. It sucks to say that, and this isn't a knee-jerk reaction to the preseason game. It's just looking at the overall talent, the schedule, the expectations, what we've been capable of the last 3 years with this, basic core unit. I don't feel like a 13-3 season is in the book or is in the cards or in the works or whatever you want to say. I feel like this is probably going to be a 500 team regardless. If a lot of these backups have to play and participate and be significant contributors this year, it's just going to be that much harder. It's like buying a new video game and immediately starting on hard mode. It's tough out there. Next comment comes from Ryan Borman. They say, in preseason, you want to see something in these players. I saw enough of Kellen Mond to at least give me hope, and he outplayed Browning with only 3 practices. So I agree with you there that Kellen Mond outplayed Jake Browning, but it wasn't that good, and it wasn't really that difficult to do so. Remember, Jake Browning kind of stunk up the joint until he got pulled, and it just proved that Jake Browning is not the guy to be quarterback to. He's not going to be a serviceable backup. If there's any point where Jake Browning has to start a game this year, I'm not talking about like 6 or 7 games. If Jake Browning is starting 6 or 7 games, season's over, forget about it, it's in the bag. If he has to start one game and it's like, a must win, or, we need this game for whatever reason to be, continue to have a good standing in the standings, we're basically going to punt that game because Jake Browning proved that he's not capable of managing a game, even though it was against the Denver Broncos. To the other point, Kellen Mond being better than Jake Browning, I would hope so, given that Jake Browning's been a practice squad player for a number of years. He was an undrafted free agent out of Washington. Kellen Mond is a 3rd-round pick from Texas A&M, an SEC school with much better athletic traits than Jake Browning will ever have. So Kellen Mond should be light years ahead, even though he's the rookie and Jake Browning's the veteran. Kellen Mond should be ready to go and be able to beat out Kellen Mond, or be able to beat out Jake Browning. He just needs more practice, and that's kind of what hurt him this week. Moving on to the next comment from Samson, one of our OG subscribers. The O-line was the worst I've ever seen, to which I agree, because we had the false starts, we had the Dakota Dozier holding penalty that led to a safety. The only thing that I could really take away from the offensive line, that Wyatt Davis looked much better than Dakota Dozier and Drew Samia has ever looked. I mean, actually, if you look at the PFF grades that came from that preseason game, I think Dakota Dozier scored like a 20 out of a possible 100. And then Wyatt Davis was somewhere in the 60s or the 70s. And I just hope that that's finally the nail in the coffin, that they finally see that even though Wyatt Davis has some work that he needs to do, apparently, because he's been buried on the depth chart for the entirety of training camp, at least he's better than Dakota Dozier, and at least they're keeping Oli Udoh out to prevent him from being injured and forcing Dozier into playing. Next comment comes from F. Ray. They say that Dozier needs to go. I'm really worried about our offensive line. Browning should not be our quarterback too. So this comment kind of hits on all of the points that we've made so far. The offensive line, I think, is in trouble with Christian Darrisaw being unavailable, likely for the foreseeable future. Rashad Hill is, a decent backup swing tackle. Is he quality starting material? We don't know yet. Blake Brandel got, significant playing time yesterday. I think he played all of the snaps. So he's at least a quality backup, as is best can be expected. The problem, once again, is going to be the interior. Is Ezra Cleveland ready? He's learning a new position for the 2nd straight year. Garrett Bradbury needs to improve tremendously, or he's in danger of being labeled a bust. We have a potential right guard carousel on our hands, but at least Oli Udoh looks like he's walked away from that job. The only guy that we can feel good about is Brian O'Neill. As far as Jake Browning not being quarterback too, 100% agree. Jake Browning and Kellen Mond and Nate Stanley, none of those guys are the answer, and none of them are ready to be a backup in this league. Kellen Mond, I think, should be the 3rd quarterback on the depth chart, and they need to go out and they need to sign a veteran who's played at least 10 NFL games. I think that needs to be the benchmark, or the requisite, is that they need an NFL quarterback who is at least capable of managing a game and a spot start. Think like an old school like Charlie Batch or something like that. Just I wouldn't be excited about Blake Bortles. I don't want to bring in a veteran quarterback like that, but it's got to be somebody better than Jake Browning at this point, because Jake Browning is not good. Next comment comes from Evan Downs. I'm most worried about the offensive play calling. The plays that were called seemed pretty bad. This was something that I picked up on the 3rd quarter myself. I got into the sense that this is too conservative, it's too slow, it's too methodical. Probably something that we need to consider that has repercussions is that the quarterbacks and Kellen Mond specifically didn't get a lot of practice time and it's just one of those things with the whole COVID protocol. So they probably implemented a very limited playbook and something that was just basic enough where they could figure out what they wanted to evaluate some of these players for. So I think that's why they didn't really open things up, because even with Kellen Mond in there, it looked like he went to his first read and then there was no second read. So I think a limited playbook was the problem, not so much Clint Kubiak just being too conservative. But I think it's probably even a mixture of both. I hope that that's the last time we see that offense be that boring, but who knows? I think that he even was called out for it. Mike Zimmer was in the post-game press conference about, why so many handoffs? Why not throw the ball more? But it is what it is. We can't control it. Next comment comes from Brett Zeismer. I hope I'm saying that right. They say, I think this game was used to find the remaining players who can grind it out and have some dog in them. Unfortunately, no one really stepped up today. And that's really the best takeaway that you could take from that preseason game is some of the fringe starters that we saw, like Chris Boyd, Stephen Weatherly, DJ Wanham. Shout out to Chris Boyd, who did have a good game. For what he played. We didn't really learn much about them other than that they're fringe starters for a reason. You hope to find a diamond in the rough in the preseason. I remember, and I can't remember his name, there was a running back a few years ago for the Las Vegas Raiders that had a great preseason, and we were all hyped up about it. I wish I could remember his name right now, but he had a great preseason, and there was like a lot of hype around him. But then, of course, that amounted to nothing because preseason doesn't matter, and it's not the real thing. But still, at the same time, you want to see a backup perform well to the point where you're like, okay, if this guy has to play, I'm okay. I'm comfortable with it for a little while. There isn't a player that I saw yesterday where I could say that other than maybe Chris Boyd and AJ Rose. That's about it. And that's not enough. That's not enough when you throw out 2/3 of the roster and give them that much playing time in a preseason game. It needs to be more than 2 players. Next comment comes from Lucas's Stash. Interesting username. One thing I don't understand was why Udo got no reps. I have a good answer to this question. So the reason that he was part of that group, the 30-plus players and starters that did not participate in that opening preseason game, is because I believe at this point, Oli Udo is too valuable to what they want to do on the offensive line and the offense in general, where they can't risk injuring him. There was just no way they were going to put him in harm's way. And they would rather see Dakota Dozier, Drew Samia, Wyatt Davis sort of battle it out amongst themselves rather than risk Udo getting injured and lost for the year. And it's like, okay, now we really have to consider one of these 3 guys who either aren't very good or aren't ready at all, i.e. Wyatt Davis probably not ready and Dozier and Samia not good at all. So I think they were just doing themselves a favor by not risking putting him in there. Next comment comes from Violet Valkyrie. They say, not horribly worried yet, being that this was 2s and 3s, but it is concerning. This was a good wake-up call for them, although it was painful to watch. I think it was a good idea. And this is a very glass-half-full approach, and one that I kind of agree with, because it's good to get this out of our system now, and it's better that we know. It's a lot better that we find this out in week 1 of the preseason, that our depth is kind of dog shit, rather than down the road when injuries start piling up or there's a COVID outbreak, and then we go 2 or 3 games with a significant number of fringe players or secondary players seeing significant playing time, and we found out, wow, this team that Rick Spielman put together behind the starters is total crap. So it's better that they figure this out now because they have time to work through it. They have time to, scour the waiver wire because other teams are going to make cuts. There will be players available that they can bring in and replace some of these guys. It's better that this happens now. And I totally agree with this sense that it was a good idea to do this because now we know. And it's better to find out now than it is down the line. Next comment comes from Pawn Queen. They say, looking back at the draft, do you think Vikings should have picked up AVT instead of Darisaw? So this is a great question. And I think it's too early to ask this question because it wouldn't be fair to really make any sort of conclusion about which player is better. You could answer this in the sense that AVT or Elijah Vera Tucker would have been the better choice because he's available. I don't follow the New York Jets very much. I don't know how he's done or played or how he's looked in training camp. I know they did just have a preseason game, but I didn't watch it. I think he's playing left guard next to Mekhi Becton on that offensive line. So the question basically boils down to, would you rather have Elijah Vera Tucker now because he's healthy and available? I think most people would say yes, but we can't really make that decision or that judgment just yet because Christian Darisaw, we don't know what kind of player he is. All we know is that he's just not available. So if you would rather have somebody who's available, ready to go, no injury history, you probably want Elijah Vera Tucker, even though he's playing a very different position right now in the NFL. He was always projected to be a guard and not a tackle, even though he was a tackle at USC. So I think Christian Darisaw, for right now, was still the correct choice. and the choice that they should have made. It's just disappointing to see that maybe the rest of the NFL teams that passed on him saw the core injury as a problem, and the Vikings didn't because they pigeonholed themselves into needing to address the left tackle in the first round of the NFL draft. So that is sort of my elongated answer to that question, and I hope that kind of explains where I'm coming from. I think Elijah Vera Tucker, we'd be having a different discussion because we would have somebody totally different expected to take over at left tackle this season. Maybe Rashad Hill, maybe Brian O'Neill, maybe Ezra Cleveland moves back outside, who knows. But that would be a much different scenario. But for right now, I think Christian Darrisaw was still the correct choice. We'll obviously revisit that later in the year. Final question comes from Takeoff 2700. Well, not question, just comment. Chris Boyd should be ahead of Harrison Hand. So I think this stems from yesterday or the day before. I can't remember. I made a comment in the video where I said that the only cornerback who should be, in consideration to have, significant starting time would be Harrison Hand. And I sort of overlooked Chris Boyd and his performance yesterday, which was good for what he played. So shout out to the people in the comments yesterday who said that Chris Boyd had a good game and he was worthy of note. That is true, and I did miss that for whatever reason. I think I was just hungover from miserable football, but it is what it is. So that's the final comment. Those are the 10 comments that I chose. Thank you all for participating. Thank you all for the interactions that we've had last weekend and up until this point. It has been a great ride talking Minnesota Vikings football. We will continue this on to the next one and for the entire regular season. So more videos to come this week. Thank you everyone for watching. See you in the next one.